Hey, good afternoon. It's a cloudy, cool, overcast day in Putney, Vermont, and I'm sitting here in my office in front of part of what I call my hero wall. You can see I have these photographs behind me. Um, you can't see all of them that are on the wall behind me, but I also have photographs on several of the walls to the right and the left of this office. And these photographs of the heroes or the heroines of my life, all of the people on them have either done something courageous or something I consider extraordinary or something inspiring. And many of those people would cover all of those categories. There are some people on the wall who've been heroes or heroines of mine from long ago. Um, Over on the wall to the left is a picture of Martin Luther King. And on this wall behind me, to my left, which you can't see on the screen, is a picture of Muhammad Ali. And so Martin Luther King and Muhammad Ali have been heroes of mine for 40 years. Oops, excuse me, 60 years. Oh, God, it's embarrassing. Um, but Muhammad Ali certainly was a hero of mine because he was a great athlete, because he was funny and he spouted poetry and he was very entertaining. But the reason he's on my hero wall is he was also did something phenomenally courageous. He refused the draft. He could have gone in the army and he would have had a kind of an easy job and he could have boxed, but he refused the draft. And because of that, it cost him. He was banned from boxing. His titles were taken away. He couldn't get anyone to promote a fight of his for 3 years. And he eventually took his case of being a conscientious objector. He took it all the way to the Supreme Court and won. And then he started fighting again. He'd been out of the sport for 3 years. He'd gotten older. He'd lost some of his speed, but he came back and was again a great champion for almost 10 more years. Um, so anyway, he was courageous, and what he did cost him. And certainly Martin Luther King, challenging the segregation in the South and trying to integrate the schools. That was extraordinarily important, and it was courageous. All of those marches. The marching people getting sprayed with fire hoses, sometimes physically beaten, um, and it eventually cost him his life. So, thank you to the Muhammad Ali, and thank you to Martin Luther King. Some of the people on the walls are just people who I think have done something extraordinary. Mary Oliver is one of my favorite poets, and she's on that wall. Um, and she has definitely enriched my life with her poetry which has um, not only inspired and sparked my creative writing, but poetry that has taken me to places deep in my soul, and sometimes her words led me to my own deep love for nature and wilderness, and so she's certainly a heroine on my wall. Um, so there are people on my wall in front of me and to the left who are just really inspiring to me and made a huge difference on my spiritual journey. I have a picture there of Carlos Castaneda. I would say the first teacher who, introduced me to a world far larger and way beyond any I knew. There's also a picture of Joseph Campbell, who, in uh, his books and his videos on the power of myth and on mythology, kind of opened my heart and soul to a deeper way of looking at the world. I have pictures of Barry Weiss and Nellie Bowles, both formerly employed by the New York Times, both um, um, rising stars in the legacy media, and they both quit the New York Times and basically wrote, you know, public pieces about the way they'd been treated, about the way, and it was certainly not because of the fact that they were women and gay women, but the way they've been treated as people who wanted to report on issues that weren't favorable to the political positions that were trying to that were dominating the newsroom. So they both wrote and quit, and they left and formed a new news organization called the Free Press. And today, when I want to read news articles that I trust and are not just full of biases and mouthpieces for a particular point of view, I go to the Free Press. And I'm going to mention two more people. One is a woman named Ayan Hirsi Ali, and she is where? Okay, my finger's right below her now. She's an African woman who was raised in a Islamic culture in Somalia. She's born and raised in Somalia. She experienced the genital mutilation and a clitoridectomy as she was given and married off to a husband she didn't choose. And she had the phenomenal courage to, at some point, leave that marriage, leave Somalia, and leave Islam. And she moved to Denmark, and she and there she became a writer. Her first book was called Infidel, when she talked about her decision to leave Islam, and uh, because of her public rejection of Islam, she had a fatah. She has death threats on her, so she's had to live in hiding and with high security. And she was elected to the Danish parliament, and still, because of the death threats and the constant fear of her life, she's now moved to the United States and lives in hiding. But she comes out to speak at colleges and universities, speak on the rights of women and the importance of free speech and making up your mind and what can happen if you let that freedom disappear. And so the other person I want to speak of is the African American man right over here. I even put a post it note with an arrow on his photograph. And his name is Coleman Hughes. And Coleman is an author and a podcaster, and he's written a book called The End of Race Politics: Arguments for a Colorblind America. I was first introduced to Coleman, I'd say 7, 8 years ago, when he was a student at Columbia, and he wrote for a magazine, Quillette, and he was a brilliant writer, and yeah, as well as being a writer, as I mentioned, he is a podcaster. And first of all, I totally want to recommend his book, the End of Race Politics: Arguments for a Colorblind America. If you want to really read some brilliant political theory that challenges the kind of race-based ideology that's behind DEI and some of that and some of the theory, Coleman will take that apart. And I also want to recommend an interview that I listened to just a couple days ago, where Coleman was interviewing a Canadian evolutionary psychologist called Gad Saad. That's Gadsaad. as I say, he's a Canadian evolutionary psychologist, but he was Jewish and raised in Lebanon, and he actually had to flee Lebanon because he and his family's life were being threatened, certainly during the Civil War. And as a Jew living in Lebanon, he got out right before, if he had stayed, he and his family would have been killed. And he moved to Canada. And as I say, he's an evolutionary psychologist. And Coleman was interviewing about his new book called Suicidal Empathy, where he talks about when empathy actually becomes suicidal, where empathy as a political theory makes you and your point of view, it becomes toxic. And so, he wrote a previous book called The Parasitic Mind, but I really want to recommend that interview. And Coleman's podcast, which is called Conversations with Coleman, can be found on Spotify or on Apple Tunes. Um, I will try and include a link to that particular podcast. But if you're watching this video on YouTube, when it ends, just simply stay on YouTube and type Coleman Hughes in the YouTube search, because Coleman also has a YouTube channel. And if you go on there, you can hear his interview with Godsod. And I mostly want to recommend that because it is an extraordinary thing to hear two brilliant people actually speaking to each other, and two brilliant people both speaking and listening to each other and responding in an incredibly intelligent way. And if you're not used to hearing or having conversations like that, I can tell you it's a real treat, and it can really be of benefit to you in if you're also trying to make your life courageous, extraordinary, and inspiring. And you will need those qualities if you really want to come alive and have a dream that's worth living. So blessings on you, and I encourage you to, make the effort and listen to that conversation. And yeah, and in the future, I'll speak about some of the other people who are on my hero wall. Have a good day and enjoy.